for being here. My name is Anna Abraham, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the 2023 Annual Torrance Lecture. The Torrance Lecture is a cornerstone public engagement event that's organized by the Torrance Center for Creativity and Talent Development at the College of Education at UGA. And it's been running for about 2 decades now. And the purpose is to invite leading voices in the creative community to impart their wisdom about human creativity to the wider collective. Now, I began as the director of the Torrance Center about 3 years ago, and I was kind of intent on ensuring that the lecture takes on a sort of a slightly different route to sort of showcase the unique potential that interdisciplinarity has in leading us along the path to really deep insights and valuable knowledge on the creative process and the creative spirit. Now, there are very few areas where the necessity of this approach of interdisciplinarity is readily evidenced, as is the case in musical creativity. Now, I'm a psychologist, and when I examine the lens of analysis that music psychologists tend to adopt in assessing musical creativity, I notice that they tend to focus on what happens in our minds when we listen to music, when we perform music, and when we try to create music. Yeah? Now, when we psychologists try to be interdisciplinary, we tend to move towards one direction, which is towards the biological sciences. So you have huge fields of study like the neuroscience of music. Now, that interdisciplinary lens has been really valuable in showing us the unique power that music has in its capacity to heal and rehabilitate psychological function at the level of the individual. So it's been great. What is relatively neglected, though, is interdisciplinarity in the other direction, towards the humanities. Yeah? And I think that when we ignore the wider social context in which we create and partake in music, we ignore far too much. We ignore the historical, traditional, the cultural, the sociological, the political, and the anthropological. We heard a lot about that earlier in that fantastic conference we had today. So I would estimate that we perhaps miss the larger expanse of the picture by disregarding the essential sociality of music, yeah? which essentially derives from its inherent features of music and what it is. Because under it all, music is resonant, music is communicative, and music is expressive. Yeah? I also believe that a scientific focus on the individual, rather than a humanistic focus on the collective, risks undervaluing musical achievement at the level of communities. Most notably, the singular achievement in musical creativity that has been accomplished over the course of centuries by one community and one community alone. I am referring, of course, to the Black community, particularly as rooted in the African American cultural context. Now, this is a community that has exhibited an astonishing pace of generativity in musical creativity that has given rise to a multitude of novel genres, which are widely regarded as precursors to virtually all forms of modern music. Now, I can think of no one better to make the case for the importance of the cultural, traditional, and historical factors that both shape musical creativity and explain its incredible impact on the world than Professor Portia King-Monsby, the groundbreaking ethnomusicologist of African American music. Professor Monsby is Professor Emerita of Ethnomusicology in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology at Indiana University, Bloomington. She is the founding director of the AAANC, which are the Archives of African American Music and Culture, and she's also the founding director of the Indiana University Soul Review. Her pioneering scholarship on African American music that spans religious, popular, musicalization, and music industry pretty much framed how scholars engage with this vital field of study. Her scholarship also intertwines with her many creative endeavors. Among other things, she's been the leader of R&B, soul, and funk bands. She is the songwriter, arranger, producer of several commercial recordings. She's the music consultant for the PBS Black History documentary series Eyes on the Prize 2, and frequent co-producer and consultant for Museum Forums. Now, Professor Monsby has also penned numerous publications, including 2 co-edited books, Issues and in African American Music, which was published by Routledge Press in 2017, and the incredibly influential African American Music Introduction, the second edition of which was published in 2015. She's currently working on the third edition. She's the recipient of many, many awards and honors, including the President's Medal from Indiana University for extraordinary merit and achievement in the arts and humanities. We are deeply grateful and honored to have Professor Portia K. Maultsby, who was aptly dubbed the Renaissance Woman in an award-winning documentary recently, to share her work and wisdom with us today at the University of Georgia by delivering the 2023 Annual Torrance Lecture on the topic Community, Culture, and Black Musical Creativity.
I want to start with my perspective on creativity, which will help explain, my journey. Musical creativity engages the imagination, life experiences, and the culture of the community that shapes one's identity, self-awareness, and a way of being. And I can't, this is my perspective after I looked at my life, how I got where what I've done in life. And then I realized that for me, which I'm going to take you through this journey, that it goes back to the culture of my community in which I grew up. And then as I've always had a great imagination, I've always been curious about the unknown, so that's where the imagination plays a role. And like I said, this will come together as I take you through my life journey. My work in ethnomusicology intertwines both the creative and the scholarly endeavors, both creative and scholarly endeavors. It represents a journey that began with my informal musical experiments as a toddler, followed by my formal piano instruction beginning at age 5, that continued through college. Along the way, other experiences within and beyond my community of the segregated Black community in which I grew up broadened my musical awareness. One musical event that remained embedded in my subconsciousness for years unwittingly led me to the field of ethnomusicology that, of course, I did not know existed. As a high school student in Orlando, Florida, I witnessed the live performance of James Brown, known as the Godfather of Soul. His show was also known as the James Brown and the Famous Flames and the James Brown Review. Keep in mind the term review. I'm going to come back to that later. The James Brown show featured MC, comedians, backup singers, dancers, a horn and rhythm section. I was mesmerized by what I saw and heard. The pulsating rhythms, the percussive sounds, the brassy horns, the choreographed movements, the flashy costumes, and the high energy performance resonated with me as well as the all-Black audience. The dynamic of this theatrical performance raised my curiosity about the production and meaning of Black cultural expressions. And I was in high school, but I just remember just being fascinated by that. And I didn't know how that later would translate for me. I'm now going to show I'll do this in a minute. I'll play it now. My presentation then examines how Brown's performance influenced the way I thought about music, the way I critiqued and engaged with musical creativity, and two, my professional study of ethnomusicology influenced that I didn't know existed at that time, and 3, my focus on African American music as part of an African cultural continuum. My presentation is divided into 3 parts: musical encounters and training, Toddler through graduate school. 2, professor at IU, intertwining the creative and scholarly endeavors. And 3, applied ethnomusicology, creative and scholarly productions in cultural institutions. So I wanted to give you this outline, and because it's important to follow, I think the most influential is number 1, my encounters and training as a toddler through graduate school. Okay. Start with the first one. Music has always been central to my existence since birth. I grew up in a household with an older brother, and by the way, I'm a twin to a boy. You'll see him a little later. But I'm referring mainly to my older brother, whose name is Maxie, and ironically, is a psychiatrist. He also dealt with music in the mind and therapeutic and all this stuff. He really loved it. But anyway, it began early with me. I remember as a toddler sitting on my brother's lap. He loved music. His repertoire was eclectic. He had many recordings: jazz, R&B, opera, chamber music, symphonic music, spirituals, and gospels. He played it all. And I remember sitting on his lap, and he was just listening to this music, absorbing everything, and talking about, you know, the sounds. He was describing, and I'm little, I'm like 2 or 3 years old. He's describing these sounds. He's describing the feeling about the music, and he's describing what it meant. And I just remembered, you know, particular part about its emotional impact, because I could see how it affected him. So this was our session. Every day, whenever he was listening to music, I was there with him, listening to the music. In our house, someone had given us an upright piano. So my brother was there later on, I mean, still young like that, I would get up to the piano and just start playing something. And then he kept hearing me, he'd come in and we listened to more music, and then later I'm at the piano, just picking up little tunes or whatever I'm doing. And he called my mother to the attention of this and said he felt that I needed to be evaluated for music. And by now I'm 4 or 5 years old. And so my mother, this is my mother, my oldest brother that I referred to. I have some other family members, but they're not in this conversation right now. And so Leslie B. Weaver was a renowned pianist in Orlando, Florida. She had begun a career as a concert pianist and decided to marry, and then that curtailed that career. And so she settled and opened a studio. And she was really well known throughout the community, black and white community, for her musical gifts. She was also the choir director at the only black high school in the city. So mother took me there, and she evaluated me and agreed that I should start taking piano lessons. And that's when my exposure to music in a formal way began at age 5. Now, what was also significant about this is that, you know, again, when you're young like that, how do you practice? And I didn't know that my mother knew nothing about music. She accompanied me to every lesson. And then at home, we had a routine. The routine was, my mother was an elementary school teacher, and of course my twin and I, we got up and she prepared breakfast for the family, my father and my older brother. And then we had breakfast, and then off to her going to her school to teach, and us going to kindergarten school. Meanwhile, she arose at 5:30 in the morning, and guess what? I did too. So at 5:30, we went to the piano, and I practiced. I didn't know she didn't know music. She went to my piano lesson, so she knew what I was supposed to be doing. And she sat there, and we go through the lesson 5 minutes at a time. And I remember playing whatever it was, and then she clapped. Mommy loved it, Mommy loved it. I got excited. Oh, you did? And Mommy, play it again for Mommy. And I play it again, and then she clapped. Mommy loved it. But let's try it one more time. So the point is, we went through this routine for 5 minutes, then we get up from the piano, go to the kitchen, and then she, start the breakfast, put on the grits, and put them on slow so they cook. Then once we did something in the kitchen, we came back to the piano for another 5 minutes, so the routine continued for 15 minutes. So in the mornings, beginning at age 5, I'm practicing 15 minutes in the mornings. We repeat the same routine for 15 minutes in the afternoon after school. So that's how I began my formal training in music. and being disciplined about it. Gradually, the 5-minute period increased to 10 minutes, eventually 15 minutes, with the breaks in between, until I got old enough, so I was doing a half hour in the morning. And then later on my own, I'm doing an hour in the morning. So from 5:30 to 6:30, I'm at the piano every morning. And after school, I'm at the piano for another hour. So that was my routine with the formal lessons. Now, the other significant piece of this is that my teacher did not believe in summers off. My lessons were year-round, including, once I think I was about age 10, 9 or 10, theory classes every Saturday morning. So if you studied with her, you first of all, you had to practice every day. She was very clear on that with the parents. And we had to attend Saturday theory lessons every Saturday, no excuses, unless we were going on vacation or something like that. So as I got older, in fact, going home for vacations, I didn't realize this at the time, but in Orlando, Florida, we didn't have air conditioning, so the windows were up. And so my neighbors now, who were grown, those my age, they laugh now. They said, I don't know if you knew this, but you woke up the whole neighborhood at 5:30 on Mondays, at 5:30 in the mornings, and as a result of that, we learned an appreciation for classical music. But no one ever complained about practicing at 5:30 in the morning, and I didn't even think about it. I'm not sure my mother did either. Nevertheless, by age 7, this is my twin brother, he's taking voice lessons. He did not continue in music. His thing was athletics, and my mother kind of realized he didn't have the same kind of the talent they thought I had. Nevertheless, so at age 7, I'm accompanying my brother and also doing recitals at age 7. And this is 16, my twin and I, we're 16 years old. So that's just an extra thing. So I started with my teacher until she decided that until age 12, that she needed to devote more time to her family, that she had a full studio, and same thing with high school, traveling with the choir and all of that she needed to switch gears, and so she went from that to she was a fantastic English teacher, so she gave up the choir and gave up the piano. At the same time, she had met another piano teacher who had moved to Orlando, Mr. Harold Wilson. He was a retired piano professor at Juilliard School of Music. And in fact, he told me his best student there, name was Portia. Thought that was interesting. So he offered to, when she indicated that she would be, giving up her studio, he said he would be glad to take her advanced students. And so I was one of the students he took, and I studied with him from 13 to 16 when I graduated from high school. So here's a sample of my playing at that stage. This is the piano is out of tune. At this stage in studios, you just rented a studio. They didn't care what you record and just come in and play. But at least you get a sense of what I sounded like I think I was 15 when I did this. Okay, and then this is another. I chose these pieces too because of the influence that they had later on what I chose to do in my own compositions. So this is more of a contemporary piece. The first is by Beethoven, and this is by Aaron Copland, who is a American contemporary composer, contemporary for the time. Okay, I'm just going to go to the next slide. So, oops, there we go. Also, growing up in Orlando, I attended Jones High School, which was the only black school in Orlando. And we had a fantastic, consistent, superior rated marching and concert band. So this is the marching band. I played French horn. So then here's the bigger concert band. And we recorded an album of symphonic music. And it was four sides to the album, 2 CDs, 2 LPs with symphonic music and band music, etc. So the point is, I was exposed to a broad musical tradition and learned to appreciate, the sounds of different instruments. And being a French horn player, and the brass sounds, and just I love the sound of the French horn, the mellowness about it. What we didn't have was a string, strings. But that was something I became more acquainted with in undergraduate school, and ironically was attracted to strings and started writing for strings and arranging for strings. Also, during my high school education, I had opportunities to perform. Not only was I doing piano recitals, I was also performing at high school functions. So here's another student that studied with Mrs. Weaver, my first teacher, and also shifted to Mr. Lewis. So we were playing, I forget what it is, but it's something we were playing for graduation. So Clyde and I often played whatever happening at graduation and other formal events that called for music, pianos at least, piano music. Also, while I was in high school, I participated in popular music traditions. This is me on the end. I'm not really a singer, but I could hold a tune and harmony, and I had a good ear. So we imitated the Motown sound, the Motown female group sound. And then here, again, I'm imitating a lot of sounds, and I'm on a talent show, so I call this Shades of Portia, so I'm in my shades, and I'm playing blues, I'm playing some blues piece, I don't remember, something I made up, I think. And then, at the same time, the social clubs in Orlando, the Jack and Jill, the Moderneers, there are several social clubs organized to take the youth, to expose us to different activities. And this is a Jack and Jill. This is my piano teacher still at that time, Mrs. Weaver. And she's talking to this group. We're going to the Carmen, to the opera. So she's telling us about the piece. So I'm just trying to give you an overview of the kind of exposure to different types of music that I had, growing up. Now, throughout my experiences in Florida, one thing that was the community was very good about was bringing back graduates, boys and girls, who they call home girl, home boy did good. So when I would go off and then they bring us back in concert, and I was brought back to do a recital, and who's had the slide, maybe, I think it may be, no, here it is here, okay. So when I was in college, they brought me back to do a recital. So this is sponsored by the Moderneers Club and the Jack and Jill. And this is my piano teacher. She went to a Catholic college, although I'm non-Catholic, but that was an interesting experience. I was the first black music major my teacher had. She was a German nun. She had been a concert pianist until she joined the convent. And then, so I was her first encounter with a black Southern teenagers, and she was my first encounter with a nun. So, a sister. But so we had a very interesting relationship. But nevertheless, she was very, very supportive, and I learned a lot from her. In fact, she also had a PhD from University of Southern California in musicology. And I remember seeing that degree on her wall. I didn't know what it meant, but I pointed to it and I said, I want that degree too. Not knowing what it was, but nevertheless. But the point here is that the community sponsored me twice with what I was doing. They wanted to showcase, here's Homegirl Did Good, to help inspire. That was the whole point. Because when I was growing up, there were other graduates that come back in various capacities, and they presented them in some public forum. And this to the right, this is the program from when, with the Soul Review, we're going to get to that a little later. They sponsored us to come down. This was the Valencia Community College. The person who headed that was at my high school when I was in high school. So she used her new resources to bring us down with plus Rollins College, which is a private, very well-known private school, and then this is the National Honor Society, Pi Delta. So anyway, the point is these groups combined to bring us in concert, and that was a very successful concert. In fact, a lot of the students, who attended were my classmates, and then their kids, and they talk about this concert today. We performed in the main auditorium downtown, the Bob Carr Auditorium at the time, which would be equivalent now to the Phillips Center. So there was a lot of just community support is the whole point of that. Now, throughout my youth, the sounds of the blues, gospel, R&B were heard blaring from turntables in different people's houses, and also over the speakers downtown in the black community downtown area of retail shops. I don't know if you've gone downtown through retail shops and the music is blaring outside to bring you inside, but that was very common in black communities. I don't know how it worked in other communities. And then there was the Black Orient radio station, in our case, from sun up to sundown, meaning daytime station, but that station is playing, I remember gospel every day after school, the gospel program. And I said, why are they doing gospel after school rather than up-tempo? And then they played other music. But the point is, I heard a variety of black vernacular sounds through black radio. And also, when the radio station went off the air at sundown, then WLAC radio, those of you who might have grown up in the South might have heard this, WLAC in Nashville was heard throughout the country, and it was from sundown to sunup. So we could get black popular music anytime. And I want to play an example here of black radio.
This is for you too, Tiger. Oh, here we are, another day. Look out, sugar, sugar. Yeah, this is the morning mayor, Jockey Jack, back here with you. Hi, everybody who's just joined us. Well, we're going to swing from now to the hour of 9. Trying to get you out that bed feeling smiley this morning, eh? All right there, sugar, sugar. Let's rise and shine. I ain't lying, I love. Well, fabulous ones, somewhere along the way. This is me, your friend, Jockey Jack. Old jockey, stir jockey, the not-so dandy. Doing the do from the Jockey Club this fabulous April day. Ah, April showers, babe, bring me flowers. And I ain't lying either. WNBF? Why, of course. Miami Beach. Serving all of my friends from everywhere, from Cuba to Okeechobee. From the Bahama Islands to the strip boats in the Gulf of Mexico. And if we're together, we got much.
Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And go back and just hear the end of this. Oops, let me go back here. Oops, hold on a minute. Sorry.
Hey, we'll play this one for you too, Tiger. Oh, here we are, another day.
I want to get to the end so you can hear the end part. Okay. So here, blues.
Cook. Back to your mother, baby. Oh, brother back home. And I'm going back to my family too. Oh, tell her bus fare is on the dresser. Run on home, Dad. Your cousin, I'll do that, please, your baby. Oh, baby. Lord, I just can't get along with you. Okay. Working a pretty little thing there for some of our friends out there.
So this is the musical environment in which I grew up, from the band, the classical, the piano, and I love listening to the radio. And the DJs, they were personality radios. They were a part of your family. You felt that they were in your home every morning, every afternoon, every evening. So, and then of course, gospel music was everywhere. You know, on Sundays, during the week, from particularly the holiness churches, you hear the music Thursday, Friday, Sunday. So music was everywhere. All right, so I ended up, at my senior year at high school, I decided that I wanted to go on and be a piano major. I did not want music education. I didn't know I didn't want to teach high school, and I didn't know what I wanted to play piano. So I decided to go on to undergrad school as a piano major, which I did do. Went to Benedictine College in Kansas. I had a scholarship in music, and there I had a lot of exposure, a lot of experiences doing different things with music. I'm accompanying the choir here, and here I play an example of the one. Then I had to, as a piano major, I had to perform monthly on a monthly series, and so this is one of my performances. This is another Beethoven. It's just excerpts because I'm having to start in the middle where the piece develops. And this is, I play another piece that, and one thing you will notice on all of these images, I'm never using music. My piano teacher in Orlando did not believe in reading from music. She says you have to be able to internalize the music. You have to know it, so then you can focus on the interpretation of the music. So everything I did was from memory from age 5 all the way up. And I think that too with the theory lessons, so I never just really played by rote, just sort of just let my hands play. I always knew where I was in the piece. Not that I always played perfect recitals, I didn't. But I always knew how to get myself out of a jam because I knew where I was in the piece. So for me, even the practice of practicing was an analytical understanding of the structure of the music, the structure harmonically where I was in the piece and where I was going in the piece. So it didn't matter if I made a mistake or whatever, I could pick up where I was and keep going. So that was another, I think, advantage. I never played with music. So I'm going to play this next piece because I love the Ravel. Everybody was into, I don't know those of you who know music formally, but a lot of piano literature is centered around Ravel. But I liked, I'm sorry, not Ravel, Debussy. A lot of people play Debussy, but for some reason I had a preference for Ravel. And so this is one of my favorite pieces, Jadot, and I'll play it for you. Waterfalls, rain, waterfalls. And also, while I was in college, I continued my French horn playing by playing in the orchestra. Unfortunately, I don't have any photographs or recordings of that. And I also continued my interest in popular music. And therefore, I ended up with I forgot about this, sorry. So my major was piano. I was a piano major, but I also had a minor in theory and composition. And I guess it's the carryover from Saturday theory lessons, for all my life, literally. And then that fed into composition. So ironically, I wrote a piece, and this is called Impressions for Piano, the only piece I ever wrote for piano. All my other pieces were for strings, chamber, orchestras. I just love strings. And I entered it into, I forget all the details, but it was a statewide or something, it is at least statewide competition. And I ended up winning first place. And it said, excellent work, where it tells me all the good points, and then it says at the bottom, originality very good, should pursue composition seriously. So that, I think I was a junior when I wrote that. But anyway, a junior or senior, I think junior. But so again, I'm playing a piece of that because I chose pieces I like because you hear some influences. That's why I say remember these pieces I'm choosing to play for you. This is more kind of contemporary. And it was performed by a piano major 2 years after I graduated from my college. That's why I have a recording of it. Okay, anyway, it goes on. But anyway, it's being pretty good. So some of my influence, I can hear a little Copland, I can hear certain my counterpoint from my Baroque studies and composition, a mixture of whatever. And then my African thing of the kind of the triplet, I like that. So they also commented on the inventiveness of my rhythmic use in the piece. So anyway, this is all interesting. I ended up keeping this. Okay, so the next slide, I guess the next point here I want to get to is that while there, again, drawing back from my high school, okay, I forgot, here's my theory carrying forth. So I'm going to show you the trajectory of everything. I'm teaching theory to the little kids that joining the academy, reminding me of myself when I'm in theory lessons growing up. So I had lots of experiences. So again, carrying over from my undergraduate, being in the Charmes, the vocal group, then I formed this group, Peaches and Cream. Cream, obviously, right here, Janis Joplin. We laughed today about this, and this is with the band from the school. And we performed. We were pretty popular. We performed a lot of local gigs and in the clubs, and we performed throughout the state proms, and we performed at KU, the fraternities. We did a lot of fraternity events, and also we were close to Fort Leavenworth, so we played NCO clubs. That was quite an experience, playing in the NCO clubs. But anyway, it taught me a lot of things about what not to do as I got older, being in music. Okay, so I was glad I was exposed early on to the things you should stay away from as a musician. And also, I have to say, my twin brother was at the same school, and he was our manager. He majored in business, so we still remained. It was a family affair. Also, while I was at the university, at Benedictine College, I was exposed to other music traditions. I had international classmates. They're from Mexico, Korea, and Asia. Oh, that's Korea's Asia. Oh, the Philippines. I know there's another. Yeah, Mexico, Korea, Philippines. So I heard that music. So I was very interested in that. And ironically, while still there, my oldest brother now, he is now in the military, and he's a captain in the Air Force in Japan. So he sends me Japanese music. So I want to share with you, the instruments that I heard and became totally fascinated from the music that he sent me. The first is the show instrument, that's a mouth organ. I was fascinated by the sounds. And I also heard for the first time koto, a stringed instrument. So, with this kind of exposure, I knew there was something broader in the world, about music, and I was fascinated. I wanted to explore more. And at this stage, I'm going into my senior year, and I'm deciding that I don't want to be confined to a practice room for the rest of my life, going on to a master's in DMA and beyond, to be a concert pianist. That I performed quite a bit, and I was removed from my culture. I missed that. There was very few black people, and then dealing with. So I just decided I did not want that as a life for the rest of my life. I enjoyed it up to this point, and I could continue in different ways. Like I continued my French horn by playing in the orchestra. I could continue playing the piano, doing something else, rather than trying to be a piano major. Now going into 6 to 8 hours a day practice, and I wasn't willing to do that. So at least I knew that. So at this point, I decided in grad school I wanted to switch over to something different. Again, didn't know anything about ethnomusicology, and I was going to go to Cornell to study musicology. Now, I don't know why I decided that. I guess that's all I knew. I didn't want to do composition anymore. I was tired of writing all the time, so I wanted to take a little break. So I thought, well, let me try something else. I always read. I was a good student, not just in a creative way, but I was also a good student intellectually. So I did well in musicology and all my other academic courses. So I decided, let me do musicology, so I did. So I was going to go, and one of my professors asked me, he was a priest, had attended the University of Wisconsin, what my plans were. And I said I was going to go to Cornell. He said, well, have you ever thought about the University of Wisconsin? And I said, no. And he says, I think that would be a great fit for you. His advanced degree was from there. He said, because you have so many unconventional interests in music, and the faculty is pretty liberal, and I think you could thrive there. So I thought about it, and it just so happened that my older brother, somehow he was more like a surrogate father growing up, and he was on the faculty of medical school there, and I didn't even make the connection at the time. And I called him, and he said, yeah, why not? You can at least try it. I said, but I haven't applied. He said, it doesn't matter. You can come up and enroll in summer classes, and then you can figure out what you want to do. You can keep the Cornell if you want to go there, but at least try it. I said, okay. So I packed up and went to the University of Wisconsin. And I enrolled in 2 courses. Again, it's interesting. I'm always attracted to theory, even though I said I don't want to do theory composition. So I started musicology, but I took the theory courses that counted for musicology. So that's how I began my career with my courses. And then I really loved my instructor. I took 2 courses, they're both theory, and I loved him. He was a composer. He looked like Einstein, and then in his office, he had, at the time, the electronic, it looked like a telephone operated booth. He was doing computerized music, or whatever you called it at the time, I don't remember now. And so I said, well, I kind of like this. And so I decided so I told my brother, he says, well, go talk to the chair of music. And I told him, this is about midsummer, and I told him my circumstances. I had not applied. And he said, well, have you taken entrance exams? I said, no. Fortunately, they were coming up in a week or so. He says, well, take the entrance exams, and then something. Oh yeah, then I had my GRE scores, scores transferred there. And he said, okay, and then come back in 2 or 3 weeks. So then I realized 2 or 3 weeks was after midsummer. So by now, my professors would knew my performance. I would have taken the entrance exams. Fortunately for me, my undergraduate college prepared students for grad school and professional school. So to graduate, we had to take comprehensive exams. That was part of the graduation requirement. And we were required to make the equivalent to graduate school entrance on the GRE scores. So I was already set to go to Wisconsin. So by my having a real good, strong foundation in theory, the entrance exams, as most music schools are basically theory. And that's why most single line instruments don't pass them, because they don't know enough about chords and structures and all of that. So I was the first student that just sailed through all of them, didn't have any. So I started my graduate studies and master's program with no deficiencies. So therefore I finished my master's in a year and a half, including thesis. So I just really loved it. And so not only, so I went to visit the director of music, the chair of music again, when he told me. He said, yes, I think we can do something for you. And so he offered me more than I was going to get at Cornell. I had a full ride at Cornell, but I had the same opportunity there. Plus, my theory teacher wanted me to be his assistant in honors theory. So he said, you could have that in addition if you wanted. So I said, why not? So I took it. And I never left Wisconsin, to make a long story short. So while at the University of Wisconsin, I continued my piano by accompanying a French horn player. I wanted to continue that connection with that instrument. I also played Hammond in bands, so I started another band, Portion of Soul Syndicate. And so we had a book. We were very popular. We played all over the state and surrounding states, and we had a booking agency and all that. So to make a long story short, to keep moving forward here, by the end of my master's program, while in the master's program, I had a long talk with my advisor at the time in musicology. I took the 2 required courses for musicology, and all my other courses were theory. So I told him, I said, you know, I don't want to go on in musicology for a PhD. I told him what I was interested in, more rural music. I knew more about this, and he was interested in jazz. He always wanted to have these conversations to me about jazz, and he says, oh, you should talk to Lois Anderson. I said, who is she? He said, well, she is the chair of ethnomusicology. That's where you need to be. And sure enough, I just happened to have been at a university. I was just led. My whole path has been led towards an end with ethnomusicology. So that was perfect for me. I talked to her, and I got really excited. And I was in the middle of finishing my thesis. I wanted to stop and enroll right then. She said, no, finish your thesis, because this is only a PhD program, and if you decide it's not for you, you won't have an in-between degree. So I chose to go into my field of ethnomusicology, which combines the research and analytical methods of culture, anthropology, and musicology. So it was a perfect fit for me. And while in graduate school, this is the other interesting thing that led me to where I am today, is that, again, not thinking in traditional ways, I decided that with that field that I should minor in African American studies, and that I would take a sub-area in ethnomusicology in East Asian music, because of my interest, that exposure I had. And then our minor area had to be independent of our major area. So for my major area, I did African American with Africa. And then for my minor area, which I petitioned for a minor outside of the School of Music, I said, I have a master's in musicology. I don't need another degree in musicology as a minor. And so I want to do something that's more relevant to my area of interest in ethnomusicology, which was the study of music culture within the context of culture. So that's when I chose a combination of African American, African studies, and sociology. And it was a great, so my advisor approved it, but when I took it to the undergraduate advisor, he looked at that, he looked at me like, where are you, are you coming from the moon or something? And he said, if I were your advisor, I wouldn't approve this. And I boldly said, but you're not my advisor, and she approved it. And so he had no choice but to sign off on it. But I have to put that in context. This is a period in which African American studies was just evolving. This is all new. This is in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, where the protests, for black studies and just all over the country, unrest, Vietnam, where all this stuff was coming together, coalescing. And at the University of Wisconsin was just a haven for all kinds of stuff. They bombed the chemistry building, all the protests in the war. So I was there doing all of that chaos. And so you have to understand, I want to make clear the context, which was new. So I can understand why traditionalists in the School of Music would find that very odd. Another thing they found very odd is that I was asked for another kind of, let's say, support, because I used computers at a time where nobody was thinking about computers in music, but that was being influenced by my theory teacher. I saw how he used computers and in his compositions and all. So I was just experimenting, and so I got that approved, and I used computers for analysis. I worked with a coder. This is long before PCs, but they let big, huge mainframes and big old tapes, and so I worked with that. So anyway, that ended up being how I pulled together then my whole focus that led me to the career that I ended up having, combining Afro-Am with my music, with all of my extra musical activities, the bands and all of this. So that led to then, let's get to where am I at Indiana University. So actually I was recruited to Indiana University because of my diverse experiences, and particularly with my experiences with bands. So we're going to get to that. And like I said, I was fortunate in Indiana. I was being recruited by the music school, but then the black administrator, who was the vice chancellor, he was assisting, one of his roles was to assist schools and departments recruit black faculty. So music school had identified me to work with, you may probably know him, David Baker. I heard of him in School of Music there in George. So I was going to work with him through his program. Ethnomusicology was there, but in a different way. So anyway, that's another story, but we all ended up together. But so while being recruited for the School of Music, then this person, this black vice chancellor, was also being appointed to start Afro Studies at Indiana. And Herman Hudson, Ed worked with us. That's how I know Ed from Wisconsin, Indiana. And so he had already established Afro Studies, and he established that he was a linguist. And he formed it around the arts and humanities rather than the social areas, political, like other departments. We had that, but he wanted to focus on arts and humanities. And his rationale was, while the money is flowing, let us set up the most expensive programs. In his arts and humanities program, music was at the center of it. And he wanted performing ensembles. And ironic, 3 performing ensembles through Afro-American Studies and not through the School of Music. Music wasn't interested at that time anyway. They later became interested and wanted to figure out how they could take it over. He says, oh no. So, but nevertheless, so then he became interested. What happened was he didn't know anything about that performing background, and he was recruiting. He believed in cluster hires. So he was recruiting like 6 or 7 of us from different schools for different departments. So he believed if we could meet together regularly, let's say once a semester, then he could interest us. He's identifying us as graduate students. I hadn't even taken my PhD exams yet. So that was his strategy. Let's get them early, the few that's coming out before everybody else finds them, learns of them, and wants to take them all. So that was his strategy, and we were identified early, so we were meeting. And one meeting he was setting up in Chicago. We were from Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, different schools. And I said, I can't meet that weekend. In fact, I'm going to be in Indiana. He says, and I'd never been to Indiana. He says, what are you doing in Indiana? I says, well, I have this band, and we're performing at Indiana State and at St. Mary of the Woods in Terre Haute. He says, oh, what kind of band? So I explained it to him. Oh, then his light bulb went off in his mind. So he canceled the meeting and instead came down to see me set up with this group. And then once he saw it, he says, you know what? Now I'd be interested in that. I want you to do something like that for us. But you saw the composition of the group. He says, but I want a group with the black students at IU. I said, that's fine. I'd grown up in an all-black group. And so make a long story short, I ended up going to IU. It's kind of split between School of Music and Afro-Am initially. And the only course I taught for Afro-Am was putting together this ensemble. And then the other courses I taught through the School of Music. I had a choice to where I wanted to be housed, and I wanted to be in Afro Studies. I'm just more community-oriented people. I wanted to be with me. So I chose Afro Studies, and I taught for music. So that was how I began at IU. And I want to say that with that was the beginning of what ended up being a very productive career. So now we skip to that phase. So at IU, with this band, I had conceptualized, I wanted to pattern it after the James Brown Review. That stayed with me, so now I'm bringing all my childhood is coming together, and I want to give you a little intro to how that plays out. Because I also had MCs. I had everything James Brown had.
This man will freeze your knees, if you will. Let's all welcome the world's Godfather of Soul, Soul Brother number 1, James Brown. James Brown. James Brown.
Okay, I'm going to play one more clip, then I go to hour. Going to play one more clip. Now look at the horns section. Look at the horns. And look at the singers. Okay, now this is going to guide my establishment of IU Soul Review. That's why I wanted to play these clips and separate them. And also, you heard the audience. So it's like I'm saying, wow, okay, look how all they're doing. I'm taking all of this in growing up. I'm seeing this and hearing it. And so then all of a sudden I realized, so this is now going to be a part of my study, my academic, my intellectual study there at IU. So I'm looking at then, so basically what I learned from James Brown was that it was a way for me to understand how to interpret, critique, write about black music. And I ended up using the IU Soul Review as a lab for that study to start with. Okay, but I had to frame it more theoretically, and I want to go to that first and we'll come back to the group and all that will make sense to you. So now my creative is combining with my intellectual. All right, so first thing I realized was that when I first started the Soul Review, people, even at IU, it's like, okay, what is this, a band? They're going to invest in this band? They didn't know anything about me, my experience, that I had a PhD. So I was known in two ways at IU. On one level, there was a group that knew me as director of the ensemble. On another level, there's a group that knew me only as a scholar, didn't know I had the other hat. So I brought both of those hats together. Now, what I needed to do, what I was interested in doing, was looking at how people had thought about black popular music. It was not considered, music of meritorious value to study. But I felt differently about that. And so I kind of broke the ice there. I developed the first class on black popular music, but I set it up within a framework. So here's what I really became to realize, that the disconnect with black music in terms of its value within the academic setting, the initial, because I remember when I was applying for research grants initially, nobody wanted to fund this, they didn't get it. And my real exposure to the broader audience with my research was through the Smithsonian Institution, starting in the 80s, and I'll come back to that. But nevertheless, this is what I ended up framing as how I began to think about this music and why the attitude. So I finally figured out, and it relates to what was said, earlier today, when the one that talks about with black music being, let's see. Anyway, the point is, I look at it as being a lived experience. So it exists on two levels. This is how I saw it. The sister that gave the talk on hip hop, she had the same image. And the other was one was a performance, and the other was, I wrote it down, because I wanted to keep that to compare it with this. It was a performance. Did I write it down? I forget, one of the talks this morning about the music. Nevertheless, but I translate, I know the other was. You were talking about, there you go, Nelson George. Okay, so Nelson George, I know that book very well. In fact, he was inspired by one of the programs I did at Smithsonian to write it. And I had all these people there, the DJs, everybody, and that's how he began to put it together. But when you talked about, he's looking at the music as a musical experience and as a socio-economic driver. And that's how I can translate it, I can tie that to this. Black music as a lived experience. That's how we experience it in the community. So going back to hip hop became controversial once it was removed from its original context and put into the commodity system. So notice here, these are early hip hop performances, and then notice what this sign says. This is very important, very instructive. No one over 16, no one over 18, no one under 16, no drugs, no weapons, no alcohol, no sneakers, in and out. They had very set guidelines for these performances. So this is what I mean by music as a lived experience. The community is setting the boundaries. It is establishing the meaning, the function of this music. Now, let's look at it in a different way. Here's Rufus Thomas as a lived experience. he talks about, I won't take time to play the clip, but we called him, he's from the 60s, Memphis, Tennessee, in fact. And, I forgot to tell you about this picture. Sorry, I skipped this one. So here we are again, music as a lived experience, which I remember seeing this growing up in the South. My mother was from North Florida, up in the Panhandle. And I remember passing by houses and seeing blues musicians in the yard. So here they're having their own experience within the context of community. These are blues musicians dancing. And I remember on some front porches in the country, there was this machine, play records. And so they're sharing the music. The music, only maybe one family could afford a turntable or whatever it was called at the time. And so it was put on the front porch so everybody could share the music. So I always thought about music as being shared, which is why when we went from she mentioned the boom boxes, you go down, they're playing the music loud on the radio. It was always meant to be shared within Black community life. The problem is when it comes outside of that context, then it becomes problematic, like what we have here. Then it gets into the economic system. So here's Rufus before I move to the next stage. So he's creating a song. This is the Funky Chicken. He produced a lot of dance songs. Do the funky dog, do the dog, do the funky chicken, do the this, that. So he has a live chicken on stage here. And that chicken, I saw this before, and that chicken stayed in place too. and then with the interview I did with him, he talked about making the song Doing the Dog. And it was all about his band was playing in a club somewhere in Mississippi, he said, and then the band was going on break. And bands always play a little kind of vamp off for the break. And he said the band was playing something, and this lady was on the floor just dancing by herself. And then he said, I saw her and I thought, okay, do it. He said she was doing these little dog type moves. I say, oh yeah, do it, do the dog, do the hound dog. And then he said the band came in with some riffs and he said we kind of made a song. And so anyway, that ended up being the riff. So he said the next time we played, they said, play that dog song. And he said, the dog song? Then he realized what they were talking about. He said they got so many requests for that song that they recorded it. So my point in making sharing this story is that a lot of times the music was created within Black community life, then taken into the clubs and taken out of the clubs into the studio and recorded, then released. So that's what I mean by music as a lived experience. But once it moved into the commodity system, here's another example. So that Sidney Bechet, a New Orleans jazz musician, said, I want to explain myself so bad. I want to have myself understood. And the music is the way I can do that. The music is my whole story. And I think this is so powerful to talk about. I want to explain myself like those musicians within the context of the lived experience. They need to be able to explain themselves as to what music means to them. So here we go as a commodity. Then what happens to music? Once it hits the commodification system, it becomes a cash cow for the industry. So here, this is from the blues. This is how in the 20s and 30s, the blues was being marketed. It's connected with crime, prisoners. So those stereotypical images persist. Hip hop, he's in a jail outfit. So when it hits the commodity system and white kids become involved with it, then all of a sudden it is removed from its original context, and then Black people don't have control over the music. So this is what I saw as being the problem within the academic settings for understanding the value of music, because we are looking at it through the commodification system rather than through the life experiences of the people who create the music. And that's what led to my studies. So you look at some of these early critique of jazz. Now jazz is so mainstream, now everybody takes it over. War on Ragtime, but this is an early form of jazz. This is 1901. Jazz, a sign of decadence. This is what the critics were really thinking about it early on. Americans the same way. R&B may not cause delinquency, but it reflects it. So there are all the negatives. There are segregations with bad R&B. So my point is this music was fine as long as it was confined to the community. But once it went outside of the community, then here it is, white rap starting to find its way, gangster rap under fire, hip-hop dominated Grammy nominations. So that's how far we've come over time, and it's because of the skewing of the context for the music. Okay, so now let me skip on to this review to keep moving forward. So the IU Soul Review was created. I was still a graduate student at University of Wisconsin. I was still writing my dissertation. And I really wasn't ready to go. And then he kept worrying me. A friend of mine said, his name was Herman Hudson. He said, Herman Hudson, he's so worrisome, he'll worry a hungry dog off the meat wagon. And he was that worrisome. He would call me at 8 o'clock every morning. Have you thought about my contract? Have you thought about this? And I just got sick of him. I said, yes, doctor, fine, yes, I'll sign it. Just so he would not call me at 8 o'clock every morning. And so, anyway, the bottom line was I said, look, but I'm not moving there. I want to finish my dissertation and all of this. So anyway, we made arrangements for me to come on the weekends. So this is the founding members of the IU Soul Review. They was all volunteer the first year. And, okay, so this is the first performance we had. Well, not the first. This is doing that very first year. And then the next year, so we hit, and here's a review. IU Soul Review Live as a Music Scene. Our really first exposure was for Black Faculty Staff Dinner Dance. And a lot of the naysayers became total fans because, again, some of them didn't understand, why is he putting all this money in this band? And again, they didn't understand the concept of this band. But when we played that faculty dance, then I could do no wrong. No wrong. Nobody complained. Now, there were some complaints from School of Music, some males. They felt they should have been offered the job, but they didn't understand I had a degree that they didn't have, or would soon have a degree. And but nevertheless, it all worked out very well. So I want to give you some sample of how now, this is how I named it from the James Brown, the IU Soul Review. So it consisted of dances, comedy. I'm going to take you through what we had. So I'll play some clips and we'll keep going. It's the MC. Oops, sorry, I missed that. I go back, I missed that. I moved this thing here and it went out of sync. Okay, I was turning to the left, the robot. It was a very popular hit.
Right now, on the stage, this is the most fantastic thing ever viewed by the human eye. In the room, they call her the robot. In Gary, Indiana, they call this young lady Danger. Here's that human robot herself, Evelyn Holder, the most talented woman.
And then from there we go into Shaft. That's what she does, her robot to Shaft. Isaac Hayes' song from the 70s. And with dancers, they're very popular. And we had a comedian who he did comedy, poetry, and Martin Luther King. So I like to combine it all together. I just give you a little clip of him. Oops.
Here's Grandpapa Ace.
I kind of excerpted.
You know, I was just being yours. I did.
He actually had an outfit on. This is on the picture I had of him.
Anyway, the way I came across this here article about it, see that?
Do you mean let's stop break the easy way?
Oh, yeah. It seems like this here 73-year-old fella is out to get that Mavis. He got a full description. A black male, 2 arms and 2 legs. And this is what else he said. He said, I bet you that's why I saw that man that was dressed up like a lady this morning. Oh, there you go again. What's wrong with you, old man? Don't you be calling me, old man. The killer don't like that. He gonna kill you over there. Does he really?
It's Geraldine.
Right.
Now he's into, so we go to the poetry. I edited this.
See me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh. Eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when the company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. As Langston Hughes saw the black man as part of America, as reflected in his poetry, music, song, and drama, the IU Soul Review is part of the black man. Therefore, it is part of America. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech.
And so we did, he goes into Canyon, I stopped it there, he goes into his speech. So we had a combination of, entertainment, seriousness about black poetry, featuring black poets, Maury Evans, Carolyn Rogers. Every show we had some, oftentimes we set the poetry to blues, depending on the nature. Okay, so here's some of the groups. This is them. That's that band after James Brown. See all those horns? I was big on the brassy sound. And that's me directing the band. And these are some of the reviews. But it's different. I think this is from University of Louisville. You saw review place, Dances Sings Up a Storm, benefit recording. Okay, so I believed in, so we did well. Every year I added more and more to build and finally I added artistic director who was from the School of Music and Opera, and we had a full staging because it was very nice in the end, the last 5 years. So it took time to develop it. Now, one thing I also believed in doing was exposing them to the broader opportunities in music, and so we went into the studio and did original recording. So this is one group here. I'm going to play some. They're in the studio, Black Flash. This is a funk group. By the way, this is in the mid-'70s. So we did the recording this is me, in 77. Yeah, 77. Took them in the studio, and so one of our songs, Billboard, chose it as a top single pick in the first time around category. And that song, let me stop you. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm going to go back here. I want to say something about this. How many of you know the group After Seven? If you don't know them, Google After Seven. Okay, this, you've heard of Babyface? Okay, this is he's Kevon Evans. That's Babyface's brother. And this is Keith Mitchell. They're the founding members of After Seven. And this is where they got their start, here in the Soul Review, as the Love Men. And they're singing here on this song. In fact, the lead at this phase is Keith Mitchell, the one on the right. And it was written by our bass player. So I involved students in compositions. And I worked with them on the piece. I kind of edited it so you can hear skips to get down. That's Keith singing. Yeah, sorry for the rough edits, but I was having to do this in a hurry, so I was skipping different parts of the piece. So here's another one that we did. Oh, now this next song, this is James Brown influence on me. I wrote this song, and I did it as an instrumental. We recorded this both instrumental and a part two. That's a James Brown style of instrumental and a vocal. And then the MC, when he heard the instrumental, he says he was very spontaneous and kind of like a rapper. He could do anything. So next thing I know, he's bringing me lyrics. He says, I got some lyrics to add to this song. I said, okay. So I listened to the lyrics, and then we recorded them with the lyrics. And so this is an example of that. She was a freshman when she recorded. This is James Brown all over in the style.
What
Okay, the next song I'm going to play, it again, it's them in the studio. It brings together, I would say, well, these bring together a variety of experiences, musical experiences early on in my life. And so this next song is my arrangement of Summertime for saxophone. And it brings it so you can really hear my orchestral arrangements and my love for strings. And I wish I had played more of this piece. It's really one of my favorites. And I edited it wrong there. Okay, so that kind of sums up how I'll bring all of my total experiences from high school through the compositions, through piano playing, all together. And I was just always fascinated by strings. I couldn't find this album I arranged on she was supposed to be like a country type singer, but I really had fun doing it. I did a lot of arranged strings on that. She did a song they called Waterfalls. And I took a string class because I didn't have strings in high school. And so I took one of the music education string classes to understand the instrument. I loved viola, and the violin was too scratchy for me, so I did the viola, mainly just so I could learn. I read a lot of scores. That's one reason how I started arranging for strings. I would listen to string quartets, and then I would look at the score. And then when I hear the glissandos, and that's how I figured out how they wrote them. And then I decided, let me take a string class so I would actually know what's in the range of the strings. You know, how do I start? So that's how I got into that, and this is what and in fact I have several string arrangements on this. We did 10 songs on this album. So now I want to skip to, how much time do I have? I'm at the end? About 5 more minutes. Okay, so I want to skip to then to show how all this comes together in a creative way. This was shown earlier. This is my chart. This was shown, Anna showed this earlier, in the museum in Utrecht. They did an exhibit on African American gospel music, and so they translated this chart into my contemporary version, 2000, and it's there. So I just want to show how my scholarship comes together. It's also on it was taken and produced in an interactive form on Carnegie Hall. In fact, you could get the current version of this. This was the first iteration, and then we redid it. And this is with a scholarly team I put together. We're meeting at Carnegie Hall to look at how we could expand it and make it to where we are today with this chart. And so here is the URL. But if you just put in Carnegie Hall timeline of African American music, you can find this because it's pretty extensive. And it's pretty extensive, and there are many ways to get to it. If you look at this, it tells a story. Jessie Norman, I worked with her when she was producing a big festival on African American music, and she came up with this idea of wanting some educational material that would cover all of this, and she discovered my chart, and then that's how all this came about. And I helped her with programming, and so then they did the chart, and so now they did another version. We did another version. I brought a team to help totally expand. I want to show you some of the content. Hold on a minute, so you can put it up to be useful in your own work. Let me see, get to here's here. Let me see. I passed it. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, so if you get to, I just want to show you what it entails. It's pretty comprehensive. So that's why I brought in a lot of other teams to work with this. So there is the timeline itself where you can go and explore every musical genre on that timeline. And then then if you want to call up a genre, so you can get any genre that you want, click on it, and then they take you through explanations, clips, sound clips, photographs, everything. If you want to go through, then I had some stories. They were not genre-based, but they were conceptually based, like African origins, adaptations, musical across the Atlantic, black composers, concert artists. So now, in fact, I have 3 more. We're working on 3 more essays to add. One on barbershop harmony, one on children's game play, and one on, hip hop, but through another set of lens. We have a hip hop essay, but through another set of lens of the whole notion of criminology and the commodification. So we want to get that story told. So the new format allows for a lot of expansion. So it allows for a lot of things to happen. So anyway, so it's something you can look at. So the last point I want to make here, let's say last slide I want to get through, is again how it play. Oh yeah, and then since then it's been licensed and it's been produced on sweatshirts, T-shirts. The chart started, and this chart started in 1980 as a teaching tool. In late 70s in my classes. That's how it began. Then I started doing workshops at the Schomburg, and then the teachers wanted a version of it, and so it just kept expanding, and it's had many lives since 2080 when it was first, 1980 when it was first published. So different people have licensed it and they've produced it in this way, so it's available in various formats. And then she mentioned 2 books that I've done, working on the 3rd edition of this book now. And then my biggest project, this is with the Museum of African American Music and Culture, where I was a senior, a leading senior scholar on this project. I worked on this for 13 years. And just to sum up how, and this is the approach, the approach then, so this brings together everything I learned over the years in terms of how do you approach, what story do we want to tell in a museum exhibit? And you should put this on your bucket list, National Museum of African American Music. It's 57,000 square feet, it's big, 7 galleries. And so the approach I wanted to clear up the myth is that as a lived experience. And that's how every gallery is addressed, through the lived experience of the people. So what is lived experience? We've already been through some of these at work. And so you erase, so you get the children's play.
Who are the critters? We are the critters. On shore? Yeah. Poster? Yeah. Negative? Yeah. All right. Ooh.
And I have and here's of course someone talked about church today. It's not, I guess it was George talked about church today. That's called a shout. Anyway, so what I want to get to, then I'll end on this, is that each of the galleries, this is where the creative combines with the scholarship. Each of the galleries has an interactive. So in the case of the Wade in the Water, there is Come and Sing with Bobby Jones. So we create a setting here where the performers can come in and we take a picture of them singing with the Bobby Jones, and they can tape it and take it home with them, and they're actually integrated into this choir. So every exhibit has an interactive. So how I was able to bring together, blues has an interactive. You can make your own blues piece. These are some images of the museum. This is the Jazz Museum, Love Supreme. Here you can do your own creative improv piece. And in the Blues Museum, like I say, you can make your own blues song and take home. We provide tracks for you. And in this museum here, and this museum, I believe in the industry part, so my research in the music industry plays into roles here. I curated this section of exposing the work behind the scenes that black executives played in the making of the multi-billion-dollar music industry, their role in that. And that's an untold story. And then the other one here that I'm really proud of here is Create Your Own Mix. This is in the R&B galleries, One Nation Under Groove, in which we put together different tracks of the Motown sound, the Philadelphia International sound, and I forget 3 or 4 different sounds. So we have tracks. So this is where my knowledge of music played in with the creative. So we created a track that was like the Motown sound. So you had to know the characteristics of a Motown sound, and then you had to know how to mix the characteristics. So then I worked with the mixing to make sure a certain, the chunk was brought out, and the mixing of the different features, so you knew it was a Motown sound. The same with Philadelphia, with all the strings and all of that in, and then you could combine the mixes if you wanted, half Motown, half Philly International, to do what you wanted. So this is what I was most proud of, because in this exhibit in general, the whole museum, I brought together everything from the creative to the scholarship and framing the story the way I thought it should be told. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Oh yeah, this is my philosophy here. This is what led me to where I was able to articulate it now. This is how I think about this. Everything I did was outside of tradition. And most things that I ended up doing outside of teaching, I never knew those opportunities existed, which is why I said unimagined opportunities will follow. Almost all my work in the public sector, I didn't know about Carnegie Hall. I didn't know about opportunities in the museums, in BBC, NPR. I didn't know any of those opportunities. But what allowed those opportunities to happen was because I chose to follow my passion for black music when it wasn't in vogue. When my director of graduate studies said if he was my advisor, he would not approve my minor. But my minor in Afro-Am and African studies and sociology really helped me understand how to frame the discussion of music. I wrote a paper in sociology, The Art of Expression During Financial Depression. I still have that paper. I wrote it as a sociology, my final paper. So this is what led to, and this is what I tell anyone who asks my advice about how I should think about a major when the mother say, oh, you shouldn't be a music major, you can't make money. I say, I've made plenty of money being a music major. I've had plenty of opportunities. So anyway, I end on that note, and thank you very much.